Jim Parsons stars as the predatory agent, Henry Willson, the real-life agent of Rock Hudson in Ryan Murphy's Hollywood. I'm Tony Ruiz of Gold Derby. And, Jim, the real Henry Willson is such a controversial figure. And so I guess where I want to start is how much of the controversy of Henry Willson did you know in advance, and how did you go about learning about him?
Well, when we started, I knew nothing about Henry Willson. I had not even heard of him. Just one of those things that I had missed, and it turned into, I see now in retrospect, a major advantage for me, because all the reasons that Henry was infamous and rightfully vilified in many ways, I only found out through the filter of knowing that I was going to have to play him. I was learning facts about him as I was reading scenes that they were writing about him, which a lot was based in truth, and some things were gilding the lily for entertainment purposes. And then obviously towards the end of the series, it gets completely fantastical. But so I had no knowledge of him at all, and like I say, it was a very interesting and pleasurable one to read some of the darker things about him and have part of my mind already attempting to humanize them, which, as I'm saying, feels very apt right now, the way things are in the world, and I'm not referring to as much to the COVID stuff as I am to the protests and everything going on right now. Just the many components that make up, what is a human being, and while Henry, we see his extreme behavior that I'm not sitting here excusing, but I mean, we're all capable of so many of those things, and to most of our credit, we don't give into some of the desires or predatory, power-hungry things like a Henry Willson did. But I don't know, understanding that those things just exist in all of us. And I'm really going off course of kind of what you asked me just then. But let me get back to it in that Robert Hoffler wrote a book called, The Man Who Invented Rock Hudson. And it's all about Henry Willson. And it was absolutely my Bible through the whole piece. I was reading it in tandem while I was working on it, and I would see certain scenes almost, the spirit of them recreated in our show that I had read about earlier. And it was very helpful too, because Robert does such an excellent job of humanizing Henry. Again, not excusing, but giving so much context to him and so much about his background that he became just another Hollywood figure to play, who had a lot of the similar components that anybody else did to make it in this very competitive business. In his case, as a closeted gay man, which wasn't helpful to him. It's not helpful to anybody to live a secret like that. But yeah, so that was what I did. And then of course the hair and the makeup team was really my family through the whole thing. I was in that trailer so goddamn long every day, but I didn't mind because the effect for me was so worth it. I just felt different after I came out of there. I'd never been through a hair and makeup process like that. And it was a very helpful, freeing thing that I had never experienced before.
Well, it's interesting. I was going to ask you about the prosthetics and the makeup and stuff like that, because and you're right. It's not something that we've seen you do a lot in your career. So was it a different experience? I have to imagine it was almost kind of like those mask exercises, like in drama school. Did it add something to how you portrayed him?
I do think it added something to how I portrayed him, but really in the way of subtraction, in that I felt I felt further away from myself. I felt less, oh gosh. I felt all that residual responsibility you feel towards yourself to, I don't know, protect yourself, and especially when you're doing and saying things as a character that are as awful as some of the things Henry did, to always, there's no matter how hard you try, it seems to me at least, there's always that part of you that wants, you know, I don't mean this, right? Which is just terrible acting. That's not a good idea. But it lessened that struggle so much more than I had ever experienced before. And timing wise for me, coming off of a 12-year-old TV show, and it was all the more fun. And I guess in a lot of ways that was the key thing for me. It helped make the process of exploring Henry and playing these scenes as much of a playground feeling as anything I'd done in many years, and in some ways forever. I don't, you know, I can't remember. I guess it really, that when I first started playing Sheldon on Big Bang was probably the last time, certainly on camera, that I played a character that felt so colorful and complicated to me at least, and full of possibilities. Like you just don't know what this character might say. And Henry kind of had that in common, for my interpretation of it at least, with Sheldon, and that, I mean, for very different reasons, obviously, but that it was like, Jesus, what might he say next, and or do, and again, once you get past the like, oh, some of that's horrible human behavior, it's, for an actor though, it's very fun to portray.
Well, and you know, you mentioned you know, humanizing, not excusing Henry. What was it about? What do you think it was that made not just the real Henry Willson, but particularly your Henry Willson? What do you think made him? What turned him into what he was?
You know, from my simplistic brain, it was really a combination of two major things, which was that, number one, he was obviously a little broken in some way, you know, and I say that really coming from the Robert Hoffler book that I read, which was, he came from a good family, you know. He from all reports had supportive parents. His father literally financially supported his move out west and supported where he lived and gave him money to live on for years. So he went in the best way you can get into a risky career like Hollywood in general. So that wasn't a good excuse. Like, there was no, you know, he didn't escape a horrible home, and, well, you know, maybe that's why but that wasn't it. I do think that there's just no doubt having to protect himself from his own sexuality being revealed, living in a world that vilified him at several different turns, you know, and he knew that, whether it was happening to him personally or not. That's just the way of the world. I think that obviously can cause a self-hatred and help cause bad behavior in that way. And I think he crossed a line as far as being power hungry. You know, he so admired performers. The real Henry Willson did, and the character as well. He was in love with them, and he loved trying to help them make careers. I think that Ryan and Ian and the other writers of Hollywood did, when they inserted that Isadora Duncan dancing scene. For one thing, it's ridiculous, which is usually decent TV. But the second thing is, even though I don't think that would have necessarily been Henry's thing in real life to do that, although I don't know, I thought it showed that he would have loved to have been a performer, and he would have loved to have been admired and thought of as beautiful and sexual and sensual. And I think, knowing that he wasn't, I think surrounding himself with beautiful men whom he tried to make famous I think all of that came together in a way that got really ugly, and that he felt better about himself when he lorded his power over these men who had beauty, and in many cases, especially they were being a success in Hollywood at the time, they were obviously able to quote unquote pass as straight for the most part, qualities that he just didn't feel he had. And I think that made him, like I say, power hungry, bitter. But some of that I'm making up and putting on him, which was kind of part of my job, you know, to figure out how I was going to play him. But so I don't know for sure in real life, but like you say, it was my version of it. I felt was sort of in that way, and I enjoyed doing that dance so much because it was that chance to say, like, I am the diva also, which he sort of says when he's not even dancing. He's got that line that they put in for Rock Hudson, you know, it says, "I'm not just a star, I'm a star maker." And it was just very important to him to know, you know, when I talk, people listen. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm thinking of so many of those scenes with Jake Picking as Rock Hudson, because you know, and when I talked to him about it, he said that there's such heavy stuff going on between the two of you, but what he told me was how actually lighthearted it was between the scenes. So how did you two work together? Because you guys have to go into some very dark places.
Yeah, well, it was interesting. And you never, it's always funny. I think that, you know, in the same way, it's so hard to know who's going to have chemistry on screen or anything like that. You don't know what it's going to be like to work with anybody, even a friend. And in this case, we didn't know each other at all. And we got to know each other through these characters and through these costumes. I'll skip to the end and then kind of about it. What's funny is that it's been very weird to see Jake either in interviews and the limited time in person I saw him once shooting was done, because he was in prosthetics as well, and he had his hair dyed a different color, and I didn't know him as him in the pure him way, like what he looks like, and he didn't know me either. And it's very, that alone was very odd, and to realize that somebody like Jake to me and me to him doesn't actually know precisely what you look like. When I think of him in my head, I don't see him as him. I see him as how they had him made up for Rock Hudson. But Jake is, and I'm not saying this to blow smoke, I mean this sincerely because it affected my approach and my work so much. I realized during it, and certainly more afterwards, is so playful and so creative. There was something so game about him. And I never worried about hurting him as an actor with anything we were having to do. And perhaps even more importantly, the way he played Rock, I never worried about, well, alienating the audience more than I was obviously going to anyway, because he didn't, there's something, and that has to do with his playfulness, I think, and his creativity and his willingness. He played Rock as somebody in his own way equally power hungry to Henry, which the real Rock, any successful actor has a certain, that drive, you know. Hopefully you don't react the way Henry does and use it in such villainous ways at times, but they both wanted his success equally, if for different reasons. And so Jake never played Rock, I didn't feel, when I was doing scenes with him, in a way that would elicit an awe from the audience, even though that's sort of written in, that is what's going on. But I don't know, it was a playfulness.
But it wasn't forced. It wasn't forced. That's the thing.
It wasn't forced. And he even added in, he toyed with this. Like, one of the things he brought to it that was or wasn't really Rock, I don't know, was a naive probably would work for a young Rock, but every once in a while you're just into a little dim about certain things, and I just found that delightful, you know. And talk about taking the not rubbing the salt in the wound of some of the things I was doing when he would he has that scene where I'm like, we got to get your teeth fixed. And he just keeps going, what's wrong with the, you know, just, he wasn't like, his feelings weren't hurt. He was like, this isn't going to work. And I don't know, there was something fact-based about it that just, it made it to me very funny as opposed to like really as depressing as it kind of was soulfully.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing that I find is, especially in the last episode, you know, anybody who knows anything about Henry Willson knows that he kind of died penniless and alone and broken. And, you know, there is, I would say, a smidgen of redemption for him at the end. Were you worried at all about redeeming him too much in light of a lot of the things that he had done?
I don't know if that's, I don't know if I actively felt worried. I will say when I first read it, I think I was scared of it. And I couldn't look back in time and tell you why. I don't think I was articulating to myself what was making me go about the scene. And what's funny is I've already mentioned this, but I had a similar reaction to doing the dance number, obviously for different reasons. It was just kind of so out there and showing some flesh. Oh, you know, but both of them, I went, what is this? And only starting to work on them, like running lines, in the case of the dance, running over some sort of dance, thinking that out, did I start going, oh, I feel how this, I feel how this could work. And, you know, with the redemptive or the apology scene, because you could say maybe he doesn't get redemption really because he doesn't get forgiven, which I thought was a really nice move on their part. You know, I couldn't help but hear the echoes of so much that's been going on in the past, especially in the past few years with the Me Too movement and everything, and not too heavily into that. I didn't want to think about it too much, but it added for me a gravity and just, you know, it's that meta thing, I guess, that happens in pieces like this, if it works well, which is like it's touching on the characters that are here right now and the stories you've been watching with the series, and it echoes of something else going on in the air right now in Hollywood, in the world in general, and that felt good. That felt like something worth doing, I guess is what I mean. Like that. God, it took me a long time to get to the answer to your question. I'm realizing I'm kind of working out with myself. Once I felt all that and was working on it, that gave it a reason to be for me. And it didn't feel less heavy, but it didn't feel scary anymore. It felt worth it. It felt worth doing it. It felt worth saying these words and seeing Rock Hudson's not accepting the apology and this character moving forward anyway. Even not getting the apology accepted was an answer and was forward motion for him. And look, the biggest thing of all that justified it for me was that Henry was one of the only characters that you've been following through the whole series who you get to see affected by the dominoes that fell by the work they did in casting a Black actress in Meg. And all the grief that they took for that, all the bravery that had to go in those decisions. The whole point is the whole what if and how would this affect the world and lives. And I thought that they showed a direct effect in Henry. You know, something about that experience and going through that and seeing Rock and Archie on the red carpet, it made Henry question. It made Henry take a look in his life, at least in his life, and at least in our version, and the real Henry was not offered such a blatant opportunity because that's not what was going on in the world, and then nothing like that did happen. I don't believe, and so in that way, I thought it gave even more food for thought for like, poof, what if, and you know.
Yeah, what if indeed. Jim, congratulations. It's really a stunning performance in a series that I just adore.
Well, thank you.
Everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the Emmys. Stay tuned for more interviews throughout the season. Jim Parsons, congratulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tony.
you.